In today's gripping story, a wealthy businessman hires a homeless woman to work in his cafe, only to be shocked by the stunning necklace she wears. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, and if you'd like to support our content creation, consider making a donation through the pinned comment link. Now, sit back and enjoy the unfolding tale. The bustling streets of New York City were a stark contrast to the quiet solitude of Marcus Fairfax's penthouse office. As the CEO of a multinational corporation, he was accustomed to viewing the world from above, separated from the chaos below by soundproof windows and air conditioning. But today was different. A nagging feeling had drawn him out of his ivory tower and onto the crowded sidewalks. As he walked, his tailored suit and polished shoes a stark contrast to the grime of the city, Marcus found himself in an unfamiliar neighborhood. The smell of stale beer and urine assaulted his nostrils, and he wrinkled his nose in disgust. He was about to turn back when a small, run-down cafe caught his eye. The peeling paint and flickering neon signs seemed out of place in Marcus's world of sleek skyscrapers and modern architecture. Yet something about it called to him. Perhaps it was the warm light spilling from the grimy windows, or the enticing aroma of freshly brewed coffee that managed to cut through the less pleasant odors of the street. With a shrug, Marcus pushed open the door, the jingling bell announcing his arrival. The interior was just as shabby as the exterior, but surprisingly clean. A few patrons huddled over steaming mugs, their faces etched with the hardships of life on the streets. Behind the counter stood a young woman, her wild black hair pulled back in a messy bun. Her clothes were worn but clean, and her eyes held a spark of determination that caught Marcus off guard. As she turned to greet him, he noticed a faded bruise on her cheek, partially hidden by hastily applied makeup. "Welcome to Joe's," she said, her voice surprisingly warm and strong. "What can I get for you?" Marcus found himself fumbling for words, an unusual occurrence for a man who regularly addressed boardrooms and gave televised speeches. Just a black coffee, please." The woman, Sarah, according to her name tag, nodded and turned to the ancient coffee machine. As she worked, Marcus found his gaze drawn to her efficient movements and the way she seemed to pour a bit of herself into each cup she prepared. When she handed him the steaming mug, their fingers brushed, and Marcus felt an unexpected jolt. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the busy cafe faded away. In Sarah's gaze, he saw a depth of experience and resilience that both intrigued and unsettled him. The spell was broken by the impatient cough of another customer. Marcus retreated to a corner table, sipping his coffee and watching Sarah work. Despite the dingy surroundings and demanding customers, she maintained a quiet dignity that impressed him. As the hours passed, Marcus found himself unable to leave. He ordered another coffee, then a sandwich, using each interaction as an opportunity to learn more about this enigmatic woman. By the time the cafe closed, he had made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "Sarah," he called out as she wiped down the last table, "I have a proposition for you." She looked up, wariness clouding her features. "I'm not that kind of girl, mister." Marcus held up his hands, realizing how his words might have been interpreted. No, nothing like that. I'm opening a new cafe in the financial district, and I need someone to run it. Someone with real experience and a genuine touch. I'd like to offer you the job." Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief, then narrowed in suspicion. "Is this some kind of joke?" "I assure you, it's not," Marcus replied, pulling out his business card. "I'm Marcus Fairfax, CEO of Fairfax Enterprises. I came here by chance today, but I believe in trusting my instincts, and my instincts are telling me that you're exactly what my new venture needs." Sarah stared at the card, then back at Marcus, her mind clearly racing. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why me?" Marcus smiled, surprised to find himself genuinely moved by the vulnerability in her question. "Because in just one day, you've shown me more about genuine hospitality and human connection than I've seen in years of running luxury hotels. So, what do you say? Are you ready for a change?" As Sarah's stunned silence stretched on, Marcus realized that this impulsive decision, might be the beginning of something far more significant than he could have ever imagined. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Marcus threw himself into the preparations for the new cafe, with an enthusiasm that surprised even his closest associates. He personally oversaw the renovation of a charming brownstone in the heart of the financial district, transforming it into a warm and inviting space that stood in stark contrast to the cold, corporate coffee chains that dominated the area. Sarah, for her part, approached her new role with a mixture of determination and trepidation. The transition from a rundown cafe in a rough neighborhood to a high-end establishment in the financial district was jarring, to say the least. She found herself thrust into a world of designer suits and power lunches. A far cry from the familiar faces of struggling artists and down-on-their-luck laborers she was used to serving. Despite her initial discomfort, Sarah's natural warmth and genuine approach to customer service quickly won over even the most demanding patrons. She had a knack for remembering names and preferences, and her ability to make each customer feel truly seen and valued became the cafe's trademark. Marcus observed Sarah's progress with a growing sense of pride and something else he couldn't quite define. He found himself spending more and more time at the cafe, ostensibly to oversee its operations, but increasingly drawn to Sarah's presence. One particularly busy morning, as Sarah expertly navigated the rush of caffeine-starved stockbrokers and frazzled personal assistants, Marcus noticed something that made his heart skip a beat. Around Sarah's neck, partially hidden by her crisp white collar, was a simple silver chain. The sight of it triggered a memory, buried deep in the recesses of his mind. But before he could grasp it, the moment passed, lost in the chaos of the morning rush. As the weeks turned into months, the cafe's success exceeded even Marcus's optimistic projections. Word spread about the charming new spot where the coffee was excellent and the service exceptional. Soon, it became the go-to meeting place for power brokers and CEOs, many of whom Marcus counted among his peers. Sarah, however, never lost sight of her roots. She instituted a policy of providing free coffee and sandwiches to homeless individuals who came to the cafe's back door, a practice that raised eyebrows among some of the more conservative patrons, but earned fierce loyalty from others. One evening, as Sarah was closing up shop, Marcus approached her with an offer. "Sarah," he began, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant, "I was wondering if you'd like to have dinner with me tonight, to celebrate the cafe's success, of course." Sarah looked up, surprise evident in her eyes. For a moment, Marcus feared he had overstepped, but then a slow smile spread across her face. "I'd like that," she said softly. They ended up at a small Italian restaurant a few blocks away, the kind of place that valued good food and conversation over pretension and show. As they shared a bottle of wine and plates of homemade pasta, Marcus found himself opening up in a way he hadn't in years. He told Sarah about his childhood, growing up as the son of a wealthy industrialist, always feeling the weight of expectation on his shoulders. He spoke of his drive to prove himself, to build something of his own, rather than simply inheriting his father's empire. Sarah, in turn, shared snippets of her own past. She spoke of a difficult childhood, bouncing between foster homes and eventually ending up on the streets. But there was a guardedness to her words, a sense that she was holding something back. As the evening wore on, their conversation turned to the future. Marcus spoke excitedly about his plans to expand the cafe concept, to create a chain that prioritized genuine human connection over corporate efficiency. "I couldn't have done any of this without you, Sarah," he said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "You've shown me what it truly means to create a welcoming space, to make people feel valued." Sarah smiled, but there was a sadness in her eyes that Marcus couldn't quite understand. "I'm glad I could help," she said softly. "This opportunity, it's meant more to me than you could ever know." As they walked back to the cafe, where Sarah had insisted on doing one final check before heading home, Marcus found himself wrestling with unfamiliar emotions. He had always prided himself on his ability to read people, to understand their motivations and desires. But Sarah remained an enigma, a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. Standing in the soft glow of the cafe's lights, Sarah turned to him, her expression serious. "Marcus, there's something I need to tell you," she began, her hand unconsciously moving to touch the silver chain around her neck. But before she could continue, a loud crash from inside the cafe interrupted them. They rushed inside to find a young man, clearly homeless and desperate, rifling through the cash register. The next few moments were a blur of action. Marcus moved to confront the intruder, but Sarah stepped in front of him, her voice calm and steady as she addressed the young man. "Hey, it's okay," she said softly, holding out her hands in a placating gesture. "You don't need to do this. Why don't you put that down, and we can talk about what you need?" The young man's eyes darted between Sarah and Marcus, wild with fear and desperation. For a tense moment, Marcus feared the worst. But then, slowly, the young man's shoulders slumped, and he set down the handful of cash he had grabbed. As Sarah gently led the young man to a table, speaking to him in low, soothing tones, Marcus watched in awe. Once again, he was struck by the depth of compassion and understanding that Sarah possessed, a quality that seemed to transcend her difficult circumstances. It was in that moment, watching Sarah comfort a desperate stranger with the same care and attention she showed to their wealthiest customers, that Marcus realized he was falling in love. As the weeks passed, Marcus found himself increasingly drawn to Sarah. Their late-night conversations at the cafe became a cherished ritual, a time when the masks of CEO and employee fell away, leaving just two people connecting on a deep, personal level. Yet, despite their growing closeness, Marcus sensed that Sarah was still holding something back, a part of herself she kept carefully guarded. One rainy evening, as they sat in the dimly lit cafe long after closing time, Sarah's phone buzzed insistently. She glanced at it, her face paling as she read the message. Without a word, she grabbed her coat and rushed out into the downpour, leaving a bewildered Marcus behind. Concerned, Marcus followed her, keeping a discreet distance as Sarah navigated the rain-slicked streets with purpose. She led him to a rundown apartment building in a rough part of town, a stark reminder of the world she had come from. Sarah disappeared inside, leaving Marcus to wait in the shadows, his mind racing with possibilities. An hour passed before Sarah emerged, supporting a young woman who bore a striking resemblance to her. The woman's face was bruised, her movements unsteady. As they passed under a streetlight, Marcus caught a glimpse of a silver chain around the injured woman's neck, identical to the one Sarah wore. The sight sent a jolt through Marcus. Suddenly, fragmented memories began to surface. A childhood friend, twin sisters separated by a tragic accident, a promise made long ago. But before he could fully grasp these elusive thoughts, Sarah and the woman disappeared into a waiting taxi. The next day, Sarah arrived at the cafe looking exhausted, dark circles under her eyes betraying a sleepless night. When Marcus gently inquired about her abrupt departure, she brushed off his concerns with a forced smile and threw herself into work with unusual intensity. As the day wore on, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had shifted. The easy rapport they had developed seemed strained, with Sarah avoiding his gaze and keeping their interactions strictly professional. Unable to bear the tension any longer, Marcus asked Sarah to stay after closing. As they sat across from each other in the empty cafe, the air heavy with unspoken words, Marcus took a deep breath and decided to take a risk. "Sarah," he began, his voice soft but firm, "I followed you last night." Sarah's head snapped up, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and fear. Before she could respond, Marcus continued, "I saw you with that woman, the one who looked so much like you. And I saw the necklace she was wearing." Sarah's hand instinctively went to her own necklace, her fingers tracing the delicate silver chain. For a moment, she seemed to be waging an internal battle. Then, with a deep sigh, she began to speak. "Her name is Samantha," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "She's my twin sister." As Sarah's story unfolded, Marcus felt as if he was watching a long-forgotten movie come to life. She spoke of a happy childhood cut short by a tragic car accident that claimed their parents' lives. The twins, just 7 years old, were separated by a flawed system. Sarah placed in foster care, while Samantha, injured in the crash, remained in long-term medical care. "We were all each other had left," Sarah continued, her voice thick with emotion. We made a pact never to forget each other, no matter what. These necklaces," she touched her chain again, "were our promise to find each other again someday." But life had other plans. Sarah bounced from one foster home to another, eventually ending up on the streets as a teenager. Samantha, dealing with the lasting effects of her injuries, fell into a cycle of addiction and abusive relationships. "I finally found her again a few years ago," Sarah said, tears now flowing freely. "But by then, the damage was done. I've been trying to help her, to get her clean and away from her abusive boyfriend, but it's been challenging." Marcus listened in stunned silence, his heart aching for the pain and struggle Sarah had endured. But beneath his sympathy, a nagging sense of familiarity continued to grow. "Sarah," he said slowly, I think I knew you. Both of you. When we were children." Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief. "What? How is that possible?" Marcus closed his eyes, concentrating on the memories that had been teasing the edges of his consciousness. "My family. We had a summer home near where you lived. I remember playing with twin girls before—" He trailed off, the pieces finally falling into place. "Before the accident," Sarah finished for him, her voice barely audible. The revelation hung between them, a bridge connecting their past and present. Marcus reached across the table, taking Sarah's trembling hands in his own. "I made a promise too," he said softly. "I promised those little girls that I'd help them if they ever needed it. I never forgot that promise, even if I couldn't remember the details. And now, after all these years, I finally have the chance to keep it." Sarah's eyes met his, filled with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. "What are you saying?" "Marcus, I'm saying that I want to help, really help. Not just you, but Samantha too. Whatever it takes to get her the treatment she needs, to give you both a chance at the life you deserve." For a moment, Sarah seemed overwhelmed by the offer. Then, slowly, a genuine smile spread across her face, the first Marcus had seen in days. "Thank you," she whispered, squeezing his hands. "But you should know, helping Samantha won't be easy. There's still so much you don't know about our past, about the things we've had to do to survive." Marcus nodded, understanding the weight of what Sarah was saying. "I know it won't be easy," he replied, "but I also know that some things are worth fighting for. And this, you, your sister, the chance to right a wrong from the past, this is definitely worth fighting for." As they sat there, hands clasped across the table, Marcus realized that his impulsive decision to hire Sarah had set in motion events that would change all their lives forever. The road ahead would be challenging, filled with obstacles and setbacks. But looking into Sarah's eyes, seeing the glimmer of hope there, Marcus knew that together they could face whatever came their way. Little did he know that the greatest challenges and the most shocking revelations were yet to come. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity as Marcus threw himself into helping Sarah and Samantha. He used his connections to find Samantha a place in an exclusive rehabilitation center, away from the toxic influences of her past. Sarah split her time between managing the cafe and visiting her sister, while Marcus worked tirelessly behind the scenes, ensuring that both women had everything they needed. As Samantha began her journey to recovery, more details of the twins' past came to light. Sarah opened up about their years apart, revealing a history far more complex and heartbreaking than Marcus had imagined. There were stories of close calls on the streets, of kindness from unexpected sources, and of betrayals that left deep scars. One evening, as they sat in Marcus's penthouse overlooking the city, Sarah revealed the darkest chapter of their shared history. "There was a time," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "when Samantha and we did things we're not proud of, things we had to do to survive." Marcus listened in stunned silence as Sarah spoke of a period when the twins, reunited but desperate, had become involved with a dangerous group of people. They had been drawn into a world of high-stakes cons and elaborate schemes, their identical appearance used to deceive and manipulate. "We told ourselves it was just temporary," Sarah continued, unable to meet Marcus's eyes, "that we'd make enough money to start over. to build a better life. But it's not that easy to walk away from that kind of life. As Sarah's story unfolded, Marcus felt a growing sense of unease. Some of the names she mentioned were familiar, powerful people he had dealings with in his business life. He began to wonder just how far the tentacles of the twins' past reached, and what implications it might have for their future. Despite his concerns, Marcus's commitment to helping Sarah and Samantha never wavered. He redoubled his efforts to ensure Samantha's recovery, even as he grappled with the revelations about their past. Weeks turned into months, and slowly but surely, positive changes began to take hold. Samantha made progress in her rehabilitation, her physical and mental health improving day by day. Sarah flourished in her role at the cafe, her natural warmth and leadership abilities shining through. Yet even as things seemed to be looking up, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. There were moments when he caught Sarah in a lie, small inconsistencies in her stories, unexplained absences, hushed phone conversations that ended abruptly when he entered the room. His suspicions came to a head one rainy night when he decided to surprise Sarah at her apartment. As he approached her door, he heard muffled voices from inside, one unmistakably Sarah's, the other hauntingly familiar. Without thinking, Marcus pushed open the unlocked door. The scene that greeted him stopped him in his tracks. There, sitting on the couch, were Sarah and Samantha, both looking healthy, alert, and utterly shocked at his sudden appearance. "Marcus!" Sarah exclaimed, jumping to her feet. "What are you doing here?" But Marcus barely heard her, his eyes fixed on Samantha. The woman he had visited in rehab, the one he had seen making slow but steady progress, looked nothing like the vibrant, healthy woman before him now. "What's going on?" he demanded, his mind racing to make sense of what he was seeing. The twins exchanged a look, a silent communication passing between them. Then, with a resigned sigh, Samantha spoke, "I think it's time we told him the truth, Sarah." Over the next hour, Marcus listened in growing disbelief as the twins revealed the full extent of their deception. There had been no abusive boyfriend, no dire need for rehabilitation. The entire scenario had been an elaborate con, designed to gain Marcus's trust and access to his wealth and connections. "But why?" Marcus asked, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Why go to all this trouble?" Sarah stepped forward, her eyes pleading for understanding. "It started as just another job," she explained. "We were hired to get close to you, to gather information that could be used against you in a hostile takeover." "Who hired you?" Marcus demanded, his mind already racing through potential business rivals. "We can't tell you that," Samantha interjected firmly. "It would put us in danger." Marcus sat heavily on a nearby chair, his world spinning. Everything he thought he knew about Sarah, about their growing relationship, about the connection he felt to her, suddenly seemed like a lie. But Sarah wasn't finished. "Marcus, please," she said, kneeling beside him. "You have to believe me. Yes, it started as a con. But somewhere along the way, it became real. The cafe, our friendship, the feelings we developed, none of that was fake." Marcus looked into Sarah's eyes, searching for any sign of deception. What he saw there, a mixture of guilt, fear, and something that looked remarkably like love, made his heart ache. "We want out," Samantha added, her voice soft but determined. "We're tired of running, tired of lying. But the people we work for, they're not the kind you can just walk away from." As the full implications of their confession sank in, Marcus realized that he was at a crossroads. Everything he thought he knew had been turned upside down. The woman he had grown to care for deeply had been lying to him from the start. And yet, looking at Sarah now, seeing the genuine remorse and fear in her eyes, he couldn't simply walk away. "Okay," he said finally, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. "Tell me everything. No more lies, no more half-truths. If we're going to figure this out, if there's any chance of moving forward, I need to know it all." The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity as Marcus threw himself into helping Sarah and Samantha. He used his considerable resources and connections to secure a place for Samantha in a top-tier rehabilitation facility, ensuring she received the best possible care for both her addiction and the lingering effects of her childhood injuries. Sarah, torn between gratitude and guilt, struggled to balance her responsibilities at the cafe with her desire to support her sister. Marcus, sensing her inner turmoil, insisted on her taking time off to be with Samantha, assuring her that her job would be waiting when she returned. As Samantha began her journey to recovery, Marcus delved deeper into the twins' past, determined to understand the full scope of their struggles. His investigation led him down a rabbit hole of sealed records, shadowy foster care agencies, and troubling inconsistencies. One rainy afternoon, as Marcus pored over documents in his office, his trusted private investigator, Jack, burst in with a revelation that would shake the very foundation of everything they thought they knew. "Boss," Jack said, his face pale, "you're not going to believe this, but Sarah and Samantha, they're not who we think they are." Marcus felt his blood run cold. "What do you mean?" Jack laid out a series of photographs and documents on the desk. "The girls in that car accident 20 years ago, they didn't just lose their parents, they lost their identities too." As Jack explained, Marcus felt the room spin around him. The truth was almost too incredible to believe. Sarah and Samantha were indeed twins, but they weren't the original Sarah and Samantha Johnson. The real Johnson twins had perished in the accident along with their parents. In the chaos that followed, two orphaned girls from a nearby group home, desperate to escape their abusive situation, had assumed the identities of the deceased twins. "But why?" Marcus asked, his mind reeling. "Why go to such lengths?" "Protection," Jack replied grimly. "The girls they used to be, they were witnesses to something big, something that powerful people wanted to keep buried." The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. The Sarah he knew, the woman he had grown to care for deeply, had been living a lie her entire adult life. But as the initial shock wore off, he realized that the essence of who she was, her kindness, her resilience, her capacity for love, none of that had changed. Determined to confront this new reality, Marcus rushed to the rehabilitation center where Sarah was visiting Samantha. He found them in the facility's garden, heads bent close in conversation. The sight of them together, so alike yet so different, made his heart ache with a mixture of love and trepidation. "Sarah," he called out softly, causing both women to look up. "We need to talk." The look of fear that flashed across Sarah's face told Marcus that on some level, she had always known this day would come. With a reassuring squeeze of her sister's hand, Sarah stood and walked over to him. "You know," she said simply, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus nodded, leading her to a secluded bench. As they sat, he took her hands in his thumbs tracing soothing circles on her skin. "I know about the accident, about the real Sarah and Samantha Johnson. I know you've been running for a long time." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, years of pent-up fear and guilt pouring out. "We never meant to hurt anyone," she choked out. "We were just kids, scared and alone, taking their identities. It seemed like our only chance at a normal life." As Sarah's story unfolded, Marcus learned of the horrors the girls had endured in the group home, of the powerful man who had visited late at night, and the terrible secrets they had uncovered. Their decision to assume new identities hadn't just been about escaping abuse. It had been about survival. "We thought if we became someone else, we'd be safe," Sarah explained, her voice hollow. "But the past, it never really lets go, does it?" Marcus pulled her close, his heart breaking for the scared little girls who had made an impossible choice, and the women they had become. "No," he said softly, "but that doesn't mean we can't fight for a better future." As they sat there, the weight of truth settling between them, Marcus made a decision. He had fallen in love with Sarah, not the idea of her, not the false identity she had assumed, but the real woman beneath it all. And he would do whatever it took to protect her and help her find justice. "We're going to fix this," he promised, his voice filled with determination. "We'll uncover the truth, expose the people who hurt you, and make sure you and Samantha can finally live without fear." Sarah looked up at him, hope and disbelief warring in her eyes. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you do this for us, now that you know the truth?" Marcus cupped her face gently, his gaze unwavering. Because the truth of who you are, your kindness, your strength, your capacity for love, that hasn't changed. And because I love you, Sarah, no matter what name you were born with." As they embraced, both crying and laughing with the relief of secrets finally shared, neither noticed the dark figure watching from the shadows of the garden. A figure who had been searching for the twins for 2 decades, and who now saw their chance for revenge slipping away. The battle for Sarah and Samantha's future was just beginning, and it would test the limits of love, loyalty, and the human spirit in ways none of them could have imagined. As Marcus and Sarah left the rehabilitation center, hand in hand, a sense of renewed purpose filled them both. However, their moment of connection was short-lived. As they approached Marcus's car, a sleek black SUV screeched to a halt beside them. Before either could react, 2 burly men in dark suits emerged, roughly grabbing Sarah. "No!" Marcus shouted, lunging forward, but a swift blow to his stomach sent him reeling backwards. As he struggled to catch his breath, he watched helplessly as Sarah was shoved into the SUV. Her terrified eyes locked on his until the tinted windows obscured her from view. The vehicle sped away, leaving Marcus alone in the parking lot, his mind reeling from the sudden turn of events. Panic threatened to overwhelm him. But years of corporate crisis management kicked in. He pulled out his phone, fingers flying across the screen as he contacted Jack and set in motion every resource at his disposal. Over the next 48 hours, Marcus's world narrowed to a singular focus: finding Sarah. He barely slept or ate, coordinating with private investigators, calling in favors from contacts in law enforcement, and poring over every scrap of information about Sarah and Samantha's past. It was Samantha who provided the crucial breakthrough. Still weak from detox but driven by desperation to save her sister, she revealed a name they had both tried to forget: Senator William Blackwood. "He was the one," Samantha whispered, her eyes haunted. "The man who visited the group home? The one we saw, doing things no child should ever see." With this new information, the pieces began to fall into place. Senator Blackwood, a rising star in politics known for his family values platform, had been using his influence to cover up a dark history of abuse. Sarah and Samantha's assumed identities hadn't just been about escaping their past. They had been hiding from a man with the power and resources to silence them permanently. Armed with this knowledge, Marcus formulated a plan. It was risky, potentially ruinous to his own reputation and business. But he didn't hesitate. Sarah's life was worth any cost. Using his media connections, Marcus arranged for a live television interview, ostensibly to discuss his company's latest philanthropic efforts. As millions tuned in, expecting to see the charismatic CEO they knew, they instead witnessed a man on the verge of breaking. "I come before you today not as a businessman, but as a human being who can no longer stay silent in the face of injustice," Marcus began, his voice trembling slightly. What followed was a carefully crafted narrative that exposed Senator Blackwood's crimes without revealing Sarah and Samantha's true identities. As Marcus spoke, weaving together the threads of abuse, corruption, and 2 decades of cover-ups, the studio fell into stunned silence. Viewers across the nation watched in shock as one of the country's most respected businessmen laid bare a scandal that reached the highest levels of government. "I know the risks I'm taking by speaking out," Marcus concluded, his eyes burning with determination. "But there comes a time when the cost of silence is too high. To those who have suffered in silence, know that you are not alone. And to those who have abused their power, know that your time of reckoning has come." The aftermath was immediate and explosive. Social media erupted, news outlets scrambled for more information, and Senator Blackwood's office issued a furious denial. But Marcus had planned for this. As the senator blustered and threatened, Jack and his team were already disseminating carefully gathered evidence to key investigative journalists and law enforcement agencies. In the chaos that followed, Marcus received an anonymous text with an address. His heart pounding, he raced to the location, an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. As he cautiously entered the dimly lit space, he heard a muffled sound that made his blood run cold. There, bound to a chair and gagged, was Sarah. Her eyes widened in a mixture of relief and terror as she saw him. Marcus rushed to her side, quickly working to untie her bonds. "I'm so sorry," he murmured as he removed the gag. "I should have protected you better." Sarah shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "You came for me," she whispered. "That's all that matters." As Marcus helped Sarah to her feet, a slow clap echoed through the warehouse. They turned to see Senator Blackwood emerging from the shadows, a smug smile on his face and a gun in his hand. "How touching," the senator sneered. "The gallant CEO rescues the damsel in distress. Did you really think it would be that easy?" Marcus stepped in front of Sarah, shielding her with his body. "It's over, Blackwood," he said firmly. "The truth is out. There's no place left for you to hide." The senator's smile faltered for a moment before twisting into a snarl, his face a mask of disbelief and rage. As he was led away, Marcus turned to Sarah, pulling her into a tight embrace. "It's really over," Sarah breathed, her body shaking with relief and residual fear. Marcus pulled back slightly, cupping her face in his hands. "Not quite," he said softly. "We still have a life to build. Together, if you'll have me." Sarah's answer was a kiss, fierce and full of promise, as the sounds of sirens and camera flashes filled the air around them. As they left the warehouse, stepping into the glare of media lights and the uncertain future that awaited them, Marcus and Sarah knew that their journey was far from over. But with the truth finally exposed and their love forged in the fires of adversity, they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, together. In the days following Senator Blackwood's arrest, Marcus and Sarah found themselves at the center of a media storm. The story of corporate corruption, political scandal, and a decades-long cover-up captivated the nation. Journalists clamored for interviews, talk shows extended invitations, and social media buzzed with speculation and support. Despite the pressure to go public with their story, Marcus insisted on protecting Sarah and Samantha's privacy. He used his considerable influence to shield them from the worst of the media frenzy, allowing them time to process the monumental changes in their lives. Samantha, still recovering in the rehabilitation center, struggled with the sudden exposure of their past. The fear and trauma that had driven her to addiction threatened to overwhelm her once again. But with Sarah's unwavering support and the help of skilled therapists, she slowly began to confront her demons. As the legal proceedings against Senator Blackwood and his accomplices progressed, more victims came forward. The scope of the abuse and corruption proved to be even more extensive than anyone had initially believed. Sarah and Samantha, though still anonymous to the public, provided crucial testimony that helped build an airtight case against their former tormentors. Marcus, meanwhile, faced challenges of his own. Some of his business associates, fearing the scandal's impact on their own reputations, distanced themselves from him. Share prices of Fairfax Enterprises fluctuated wildly as investors grappled with the uncertainty surrounding the company's future. But for every door that closed, new ones seemed to open. Marcus's courageous stand against corruption earned him a new legion of supporters. Ethical investors rallied behind him, and job applications flooded in from people inspired by his integrity. Through it all, Marcus and Sarah's relationship deepened. The crucible of their shared ordeal had forged a bond stronger than either had thought possible. Late one night, as they sat on the balcony of Marcus's penthouse, looking out over the city lights, Sarah turned to him with tears in her eyes. "I never thought I'd have this," she said softly. "A life without fear. Someone to love who knows all of me, the good and the bad." Marcus pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "You deserve all of this and more," he murmured. "I'm just grateful I get to be part of your journey." As weeks turned into months, a new normal began to take shape. The café, which had been temporarily closed during the height of the scandal, reopened to overwhelming support from the community. Sarah, with Marcus's encouragement, took on a more prominent role in its management, implementing programs to help at-risk youth and survivors of abuse. Samantha, having completed her rehabilitation program, joined her sister at the café. Her road to recovery was ongoing, but with each passing day, she grew stronger and more confident. The sisters, once torn apart by circumstance and trauma, were finally building the life they had always dreamed of. Marcus, inspired by their resilience, expanded his philanthropic efforts. He established a foundation dedicated to supporting survivors of abuse and advocating for reforms in the foster care system, and the power of truth to overcome even the darkest of circumstances. The public response was overwhelming. Messages of support poured in from around the world. Survivors, inspired by Sarah and Samantha's courage, began to speak out. Politicians, facing pressure from their constituents, introduced legislation to strengthen protections for children in the foster care system. On the evening after the interview aired, "These past months have been the most challenging and the most rewarding of my life. You've shown me what true strength and courage look like. You've made me a better man, a better human being, and I can't imagine facing another day without you by my side." Slowly, he stood and moved around the table, dropping to one knee beside her chair. From his pocket, he produced a small, velvet box. "Sarah," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "will you marry me?" As he opened the box to reveal a stunning diamond ring, Sarah gasped. For a moment, she was transported back to that first day in the rundown Café when a chance encounter had set them on this extraordinary journey. Tears of joy streaming down her face, Sarah nodded. "Yes," she whispered, 1,000 times. "Yes." As Marcus slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into a passionate kiss, fireworks suddenly erupted in the sky above them. Sarah pulled back, laughing in delight and surprise. "Did you plan that?" she asked, gesturing to the spectacular display. Marcus grinned sheepishly. "I may have called in a few favors," he admitted. "I wanted this moment to be as magical as you are." As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms with the city spread out before them and fireworks painting the sky, Sarah marveled at the twists and turns that had brought them to this moment. From a life of fear and hiding to one of love and infinite possibilities, she had found her happy ending, or rather, her new beginning. Little did they know, as they celebrated their engagement, that their greatest adventure was yet to come. The path ahead would hold joy and sorrow, triumphs and challenges, but together, they were ready to face whatever life had in store. As news of Marcus and Sarah's engagement spread, it seemed to mark a turning point in their lives. The media frenzy that had surrounded them began to subside, allowing them to focus on building their future together. The wedding planning became a joyous distraction from the ongoing legal proceedings against Senator Blackwood and his associates. Sarah, who had never dared to dream of such happiness, threw herself into the details with surprising enthusiasm. Marcus delighted in seeing this lighter side of her, relishing every moment of shared laughter and excitement. Samantha, now steadily employed at the cafe and attending college part-time, took on the role of maid of honor with gusto. The sisters' relationship, once strained by years of separation and hardship, blossomed into a deep friendship. Their shared past no longer haunted them, but instead served as a testament to their resilience. As the wedding day approached, an unexpected complication arose. A journalist, digging deeper into the Blackwood case, uncovered evidence that suggested Sarah and Samantha's true identities might be exposed. The threat of their carefully constructed lives unraveling loomed once again. Marcus, determined to protect his fiancée and future sister-in-law, sprang into action. He assembled a team of the best lawyers and crisis management experts money could buy. Together, they crafted a strategy to get ahead of the story. In a bold move, Marcus and Sarah decided to reveal the truth themselves, on their own terms. They arranged a press conference where they would finally share the full story of the twins, past, and their journey to the present. The night before the conference, Sarah was plagued with doubts and fears. As she tossed and turned beside a sleeping Marcus, the weight of their decision pressed heavily upon her. "What if they hate us?" she whispered into the darkness. "What if they think we're criminals?" Marcus stirred, pulling her close. "They won't," he murmured reassuringly. "You and Samantha were children, victims of a terrible system. People will understand that." Sarah nestled into his embrace, drawing strength from his unwavering support. "And if they don't?" Marcus kissed her forehead gently. Then we'll face it together. Remember, love, you're not alone anymore. Whatever comes, we'll handle it as a family. The press conference was a media sensation. Sarah and Samantha, with Marcus by their side, bravely shared their story. They spoke of the abuse they had endured, the desperate decision to assume new identities, and their years of living in fear. But they also spoke of healing, of finding love and purpose, and of their determination to use their experiences to help others. The public reaction was overwhelmingly positive. Messages of support flooded in, and with many praising the twins' courage and resilience. Legal experts weighed in, assuring that given the circumstances, Sarah and Samantha were unlikely to face any charges for their assumed identities. In the wake of the revelation, Marcus's foundation saw a surge in donations and volunteers. Sarah and Samantha became powerful advocates for foster care reform and support for abuse survivors. Their story, once a source of shame and fear, became a beacon of hope for others who had suffered similar traumas. With this final burden lifted, Sarah and Marcus were free to focus on their wedding. The ceremony, held in the garden of the brownstone that housed their beloved Café, was an intimate affair filled with love and laughter. As Sarah walked down the aisle, radiant in a simple white gown, Marcus felt his heart swell with emotion. This woman, who had overcome so much and shown such incredible strength, was choosing to spend her life with him. As they exchanged vows, promising to love and support each other through whatever life might bring, there wasn't a dry eye in the audience. The reception that followed was a joyous celebration of love and new beginnings. Samantha, glowing with happiness for her sister, delivered a touching speech that left everyone in tears. Even Jack, Marcus's normally stoic investigator, was seen discreetly wiping his eyes. As the night wore on, Marcus pulled Sarah aside for a moment of privacy. Leading her to a quiet corner of the garden, he presented her with a small, elegantly wrapped box. "What's this?" Sarah asked, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "Open it," Marcus urged gently. Inside, Sarah found a delicate silver locket. As she opened it, she gasped. On one side was a tiny photograph of her and Samantha as children, taken just days before the accident that had changed their lives forever. On the other side was a recent photo of the two of them, smiling and happy. "How did you—" Sarah began, her voice choked with emotion. Marcus smiled softly. "Jack found it in the old case files. I wanted you to have a piece of your past to carry with you into our future. A reminder of how far you've come and how strong you are." Tears of joy streaming down her face, Sarah threw her arms around Marcus. "I love you," she whispered fiercely, "more than I ever thought possible." As they rejoined the celebration, Sarah felt a sense of completeness she had never known before. She had a loving husband, a sister she adored, and a purpose that filled her with passion. The road ahead might not always be smooth, but she knew that with Marcus by her side, she could face anything. Little did they know, as they danced under the stars surrounded by loved ones, that their greatest challenge and their greatest joy was just around the corner. A new chapter in their extraordinary journey was about to begin, one that would test their love, their resilience, and their faith in each other in ways they could never have imagined. The first year of marriage flew by in a whirlwind of love, laughter, and shared dreams. Marcus and Sarah settled into a comfortable rhythm, balancing their professional commitments with their personal life. The Café continued to thrive, becoming a beacon of hope and community in the neighborhood. Marcus's foundation expanded its reach, making significant strides in foster care reform and support for abuse survivors. As their first wedding anniversary approached, Sarah began to feel unwell. At first, she dismissed it as stress from their busy lives. But when the symptoms persisted, Marcus insisted she see a doctor. The news they received was both shocking and joyous. Sarah was pregnant. The pregnancy brought a mix of emotions for Sarah. While overjoyed at the prospect of starting a family with Marcus, she also grappled with fears stemming from her traumatic past. The idea of bringing a child into the world, given her own painful childhood, filled her with anxiety. Marcus, sensing her turmoil, was a constant source of support. He arranged for Sarah to see a therapist specializing in childhood trauma. helping her work through her fears and insecurities. Together, they attended parenting classes and support groups for survivors becoming parents. As Sarah's belly grew, so did her confidence. She began to see this child as a symbol of hope, a chance to create the loving family she and Samantha had been denied. Samantha, thrilled at the prospect of becoming an aunt, threw herself into helping prepare for the baby's arrival. However, fate had other plans. In her 7th month of pregnancy, Sarah woke up one night in excruciating pain. Marcus rushed her to the hospital, his heart pounding with fear. The doctors delivered devastating news. Sarah had developed a rare pregnancy complication that threatened both her life and that of their unborn child. The next 48 hours were a blur of medical procedures, agonizing decisions, and fervent prayers. Sarah was rushed into emergency surgery, leaving Marcus to face the terrifying possibility of losing both his wife and child. As Marcus paced the waiting room, Samantha by his side, he found himself questioning everything. Had they tempted fate by daring to be too happy? Was this the universe's way of reminding them that people like Sarah and Samantha didn't get happy endings? Just when hope seemed lost, a tired but smiling doctor emerged from the operating room. Against all odds, both Sarah and the baby had survived. Their daughter, born 2 months premature, was tiny but fighting. The weeks that followed were a roller coaster of emotions. Sarah slowly recovered from her surgery, her body bearing new scars but her spirit unbroken. Their daughter, whom they named Hope, remained in the NICU, growing stronger each day under the watchful eyes of dedicated nurses. Marcus practically lived at the hospital, dividing his time between Sarah's recovery room and the NICU. He marveled at the strength of his wife and the tenacity of his tiny daughter. In those quiet hours, holding Hope's miniature hand through the incubator window, Marcus found a new depth to his love for Sarah and a fierce protectiveness for their child. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, they were able to bring Hope home. As they settled into their new life as parents, both Sarah and Marcus found themselves facing unexpected challenges and joys. Sarah, who had feared she wouldn't know how to be a good mother, discovered an innate nurturing ability that surprised even her. The love she felt for Hope was unlike anything she had ever experienced, pure, unconditional, and healing in ways she hadn't anticipated. Marcus, always the confident businessman, found himself endearingly out of his depth in the world of diapers and midnight feedings, but he approached fatherhood with the same determination and dedication he brought to everything else in his life, quickly becoming an expert in swaddling and lullabies. One night, as they stood over Hope's crib watching her sleep, Sarah turned to Marcus with tears in her eyes. "I never thought I could be this happy," she whispered. "Sometimes I'm afraid I'll wake up and find out it's all been a dream." Marcus pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "It's real, my love. All of it. And you deserve every bit of this happiness and more." As Hope grew, so did their family's joy. Samantha blossomed in her role as an aunt, her bond with Hope helping to heal some of the lingering wounds from her own childhood. The cafe became a second home for Hope, with regular customers delighting in watching her grow. But life, as they had learned, was never without its challenges. As Hope approached her first birthday, Marcus received news that would once again test their resilience and the strength of their love. A series of anonymous threats began arriving, targeting not just Marcus and Sarah, but little Hope as well. The shadows of their past, which they thought they had finally escaped, loomed once more. As they faced this new threat, Marcus and Sarah knew that protecting their family would require all the courage, love, and determination they could muster. With Hope's safety at stake and their hard-won happiness under threat, they prepared to face their greatest challenge yet, one that would push their love to its limits and force them to confront the darkest parts of their past once and for all. The threats against Marcus, Sarah, and little Hope cast a dark cloud over what should have been a joyous time. As Hope's first birthday approached, the family found themselves living in a state of constant vigilance, their hard-won peace shattered by an unseen enemy. Marcus immediately sprang into action, hiring a top-notch security team to protect his family. The penthouse was outfitted with state-of-the-art security systems, and bodyguards became a constant presence in their lives. Sarah, drawing on the strength she had cultivated over years of adversity, refused to let fear dictate their lives. She was determined to give Hope a normal, happy childhood, despite the circumstances. As the investigation into the threats progressed, a disturbing pattern emerged. The messages contained details about Sarah and Samantha's past that had never been made public. It became clear that whoever was behind this had intimate knowledge of the sisters' history. Suspicion initially fell on associates of the now imprisoned Senator Blackwood, but as Jack and his team dug deeper, they uncovered a more complex web of deceit. The trail led them to a shadowy figure from Sarah and Samantha's past, someone they had thought long gone. It was revealed that one of the administrators from the foster care system, a man named Richard Hawthorne, had been quietly covering his tracks for years. He had been complicit in the abuse suffered by Sarah, Samantha, and countless other children, and had profited handsomely from his silence. The exposure of the Blackwood scandal had put him at risk of discovery, and he was desperate to silence anyone who could implicate him. As the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, Marcus and Sarah faced a difficult decision. They could go to the authorities with what they knew, potentially putting themselves and Hope at greater risk, or they could attempt to handle the situation privately. After much deliberation, they decided to take a bold step. With the help of Jack and his team, they set up an elaborate sting operation to trap Hawthorne. The plan was risky, requiring Sarah to confront her abuser face to face, but she was determined to end this chapter of their lives once and for all. The night of the operation was tense. Marcus, watching from a nearby surveillance van, felt his heart race as Sarah entered the meeting point. Samantha, who had insisted on being involved, was positioned nearby as backup. As Hawthorne arrived, his smug confidence quickly turned to shock when he realized he had been outmaneuvered. Sarah, drawing on a well of strength she didn't know she possessed, confronted him with the evidence of his crimes. The entire exchange was recorded, providing irrefutable proof of his guilt. Just as Hawthorne realized he was trapped, he made a desperate move, pulling out a concealed weapon. Time seemed to stand still as Marcus watched in horror, unable to reach Sarah in time. But before Hawthorne could act, Samantha emerged from her hiding place, tackling him to the ground. The sisters, who had once been victims, had become each other's protectors. In the aftermath of Hawthorne's arrest, a sense of true closure finally settled over the family. The last links to their painful past had been severed, allowing them to look to the future with renewed hope and optimism. Hope's first birthday party, delayed by the recent events, became a celebration not just of her life, but of their family's strength and resilience. As they watched their daughter toddle around the festively decorated cafe, surrounded by loved ones, Marcus and Sarah felt a profound sense of gratitude. That night, after the party had wound down and Hope was asleep in her crib, Marcus and Sarah stood on the balcony of their penthouse, looking out over the city lights. Sarah leaned into Marcus's embrace, feeling truly safe for the first time in her life. "We did it," she said softly. "We really did it. We're free." Marcus kissed the top of her head, his arms tightening around her. "We did," he agreed. "And now, my love, the real adventure begins." As they stood there, contemplating their future, they knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Their love, tested by fire and strengthened by adversity, had become an unbreakable bond. The story of Marcus and Sarah, once a tale of secrets and survival, had transformed into one of triumph and hope. And as they looked forward to the years ahead, they knew that the best chapters of their lives were still to be written. As the years passed, Marcus and Sarah's life settled into a rhythm of joy, purpose, and continued growth. Hope grew into a vibrant, compassionate young girl, her spirit untouched by the shadows that had once loomed over her parents' lives. The couple welcomed a second child, a son they named Ethan, whose arrival further cemented their sense of family and belonging. The Café, now a thriving community hub, became a model for similar establishments across the country. Sarah's vision of creating a safe space for at-risk youth and survivors of abuse had blossomed into a nationwide movement. She traveled frequently, speaking at conferences and advising other organizations on how to implement similar programs. Marcus's foundation had grown exponentially. its influence reaching far beyond foster care reform. It now tackled a range of social issues, from education inequality to mental health support. Marcus found himself increasingly drawn into policy discussions at the highest levels, his business acumen and passion for social justice making him a respected voice in political circles. Samantha, having completed her degree, joined the foundation full-time. Her personal experiences and academic knowledge made her an invaluable asset in developing programs for abuse survivors. She also found love, marrying a kind-hearted therapist she met through her work. As Hope approached her teenage years, Sarah and Marcus faced new challenges. They struggled with how much to tell their children about their past, wanting to protect them while also being honest. After much discussion, they decided to gradually share their story, adapting it to be age-appropriate. One evening, after a particularly emotional conversation with Hope about her mother's childhood, Sarah found herself overwhelmed by memories. She retreated to the rooftop garden, a place that had always brought her peace. Marcus, sensing her need, joined her silently, offering his unwavering support. "Do you ever wonder," Sarah asked softly, "what our lives would be like if we hadn't met that day in the cafe?" Marcus took her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But then I look at our children, at the work we've done, at the life we've built together, and I know that this was always meant to be our path." Sarah leaned into him, drawing strength from his presence as she had countless times before. "I used to think that my past would always define me," she mused, "that I'd never escape it. But now you're helping others rewrite their stories," Marcus finished for her, pride evident in his voice. "You're living proof that it's possible to overcome even the darkest of beginnings." As they stood there, overlooking the city they'd come to love, Sarah felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. The journey hadn't been easy, but every struggle, every fear conquered had led them to this moment. Their family story began to inspire others. Hope, showing a natural talent for writing, started a blog sharing her experiences as the child of survivors. Her honest, heartfelt posts resonated with countless readers, sparking important conversations about intergenerational trauma and healing. Ethan, quieter but no less passionate, threw himself into volunteer work, spending his weekends at shelters and community centers. His gentle nature and ability to connect with troubled youth made him a natural mentor. As Marcus and Sarah watched their children grow into compassionate, socially conscious adults, they felt a sense of pride that went beyond personal accomplishment. They had not only broken the cycle of abuse and secrecy that had defined their own childhoods, but had raised a new generation committed to making the world a better place. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Marcus surprised Sarah with a vow renewal ceremony. Surrounded by their children, Samantha and her family, and the many friends they'd made over the years, they once again pledged their love and commitment to each other. As they exchanged rings, Marcus spoke from the heart. "Oh, Sarah, when I met you, I thought I was saving you. But the truth is, you saved me. You showed me what real strength looks like, what it means to truly live and love without fear. Every day with you is a gift, and I'm grateful for each one." Sarah, tears glistening in her eyes, responded in kind. "Marcus, you saw me when I was invisible, loved me when I thought I was unlovable. You've been my partner, my rock, my home. With you, I've learned that love isn't just about grand gestures or overcoming obstacles. It's about the quiet moments, the daily choice to support and cherish each other. I choose you, today and always." As they sealed their renewed vows with a kiss, cheers and applause erupted from their gathered loved ones. Hope and Ethan enveloped their parents in a group hug, their faces beaming with joy and love. Later that night, as the celebration wound down, Marcus and Sarah found themselves once again on their balcony, a callback to so many pivotal moments in their relationship. The city stretched out before them, a glittering tapestry of lights and possibilities. "What do you think the next 25 years will bring?" Sarah asked, a hint of excitement in her voice. Marcus pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I don't know," he admitted. but as long as I'm facing them with you, I know they'll be beautiful." As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, they felt a profound sense of peace. Their story, once marked by pain and secrecy, had become a testament to the power of love, resilience, and the human spirit's capacity for growth and healing. And though they couldn't see the future, they knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, just as they always had, just as they always would.